Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Sacred Stoners podcast, where we will be discussing all things Fire Emblem. And given that this is the first episode, some introductions are in order. I'm ActualLizard. I'm a Fire Emblem YouTuber. Given that this is the first episode, that's probably how you found this podcast. But if not, I'm a Fire Emblem YouTuber. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Sequitur.
Hi, I'm not an FE YouTuber. I'm just an FE fan. Mostly just for the past FE6 and onward. I'm still working on the older games, but yeah.
And today we have on with us our first guest, Alexis Sara.
Hi, I'm Alexis Sara. I am a queer comics and video game writer / designer person. I love Fire Emblem. I've been playing it since the series came out in the West. And yeah, I'm excited to talk with ActualLizard and Sec.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about mostly LGBTQ plus representation and presentation in the Fire Emblem series. We're going to start with a little warm-up question, which is I would love to hear from you guys, and then I'll give mine, who your favorite queer Fire Emblem pairing is. Why don't we start with Sec? Tell me yours, Sec.
So it took me forever to figure out which one I wanted to do. I don't really have one specifically, but I'm going with one of the newer ones. I really like Panette and Tamara from Engage. Engage has no non-avatar ships in general, but I really like their supports. I like the way that how much you can tell how much they actively care about each other. The way that Panette sees Tamara as sort of saving her, and then kind of overcorrects, changing herself for Tamara, which Tamara never really asked for, but still kind of appreciates. It's sweet.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably one of the best picks for Engage because, I mean, I know it's not explicit, but Tamara, Panette, and Marin, it's really easy to read romance into that, I think.
No, it is.
The Rocket of Psalm is my favorite Engage ship. The three of them together is they're just so cute. They're so cute.
Yeah, big polycule vibes, definitely.
All right, and then what's your favorite pairing, Alexis, Sara?
My favorite pairing. This is so hard because I am in terms of a Fire Emblem fan. Being a big fan of ships is probably up there in terms of my engagement. But I love. I think I got to give the shout out to Florina and Lynn for being my first ship ever. I didn't ship anything, and then I saw Florina and Lynn, and I didn't really realize I was shipping them at first. I was just like, they should, live together forever. I didn't really get it, but I was like, these two are inseparable, and yeah, and there was some good subtext there, and there's a reason that Lynn is in an FE6. Florina, who else is in an FE6? Coincidence? I don't know.
That's always a funny one to me because when I played FE7 when I was I don't know, I would have been maybe 8 or 9. I totally didn't get it, right? So I remember later when I learned about shipping and got more online, and people were like, "Oh yeah, we ship Florina and Lynn," and I was like, "Oh really? I wonder why." And then I went back and read the support, and I was like, "Oh, yeah." My pick for my favorite is Catherine and Shamir from Three Houses. Three Houses is one of my favorite games in the series, and I really like their dynamic. I feel like the reason why I like them is because they feel very grounded to me. I feel like I know Catherine's and Shamir's, people with that dynamic. Especially with Catherine kind of being awkward, being flirted to, and kind of it feels like discovering aspects of herself through their support. So that's something I really enjoy. I liked that pairing. I like that it seems to have only become more canon in Hopes and Heroes since Three Houses. So that's always been one that I really like.
Yeah, that was on my list of other ones I considered. Erica and Lars Shell was too.
Yeah, Three Houses has so many great ships. I definitely was tempted to just say like the Edelgard polycule, but I felt like that was non-committal. I'd be like, let me explain everyone that's in the polycule and where they stand. So I decided to just go with Lynn and Florina.
Yeah, I kind of had
Yeah.
the same issue with Three Houses. Just like there's so many good ships in that game, and I was like, none of them are like entirely my favorite, but I'm like, I like most of them.
Well, I'm glad that we all agree that there's some good ships in Three Houses, because that kind of brings me to the first kind of question I wanted to talk about on our topic, which is kind of, what does good representation mean to you? What does it look like? And like, why is it important to you? So it's good that we all have one game that we like.
Okay. Um, I guess good representation for me, I don't want to say I don't look for it in Fire Emblem. It's just usually with the way shipping works, it's kind of like nice if it's there at all. When I think of like things I like that have really good representation, it's ones that kind of feel like the queerness is a part of that character's identity. It's not their only defining trait, but it's like naturally woven into their character. I think my favorite queer rep like ever is like Night in the Woods, just because it's like so authentic. It's like a big deal for those characters, but it's not their only thing going on, and it comes up in ways that don't usually come up, like how like they're in a small town and they're like the only other queer people they know, and that feels real to me. And it's good to have that, because a lot of the time a lot of kids grow up just not knowing themselves at all, and then don't see themselves at all in media at all. And it's nice to be able to find ways to identify with yourself if you don't have that in like school or anything else.
Yeah. I think what you touched on at the end there is part of why representation is important to me, which is letting people see queer characters in fiction, where like for me, I didn't discover that I was bisexual until college. And I think a big part of that for me was there was really nothing, not only was there nothing pushing me to like explore that aspect of myself, but rather a lot of culture is pushing you away from exploring that, right?
Hmm.
um so I think having characters that, show you queerness is good in that way.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah, I mean, like even like, and that's why like such diverse representation is so important too, because like I knew what being trans was kind of early on because I was on the internet and I was like looking for it because that's how trans I was, right? So I was like actively seeking out stuff, but like then there was a lot of like gatekeeping at the time because I'm 31, and at the time of like forums and stuff, it was still very like you need to be straight and you need to do this. So like I didn't know that like being trans and then also being a lesbian was like or was possible. I think at the time I like thought that it could be possible because I knew somewhere like internally it was true. And I would like fight with people about it, but like I had internalized what adult trans people on the internet had told me, and like, well, I can't be trans because I like women.
Hmm.
Um, so like because I had internalized that, like it was, and if there was representation of trans people who were lesbians, then I would be like, yeah, I mean, I can do that. I can be like this person, right? Or if even more representation of lesbians in general, like that wasn't, at the time what there was like the L word maybe, and I'd never watched it. I never knew it existed. So like, but yeah, so like representation can really help, push the push that from like this is a person who theoretically exists to like this is a kind of person I could be. So like even when you become aware of a concept, having like a role model can be really useful, or at least kind of like a template to then, deviate from.
Yeah, I think what you said was a good point on like diverse representation being important, and it's something I wanted to talk about in regards to Fire Emblem, where it feels like in Fire Emblem, LGBT representation, especially in more recent games, is often like we get like mostly we get the occasional explicitly gay character. We don't get too many explicitly lesbian characters. Um and then we get a lot of what I'm gonna call like Schrodinger's bisexual, where like they're gay if you're a male avatar and you choose to date them, or like if it's a woman, they're gay if you're a woman avatar and they decide to date you. But like in any other circumstance, there's like nothing in the game suggesting that they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an issue that I sort of have with a lot of rep in the series, because a lot of it's, if it's not like not explicit, like some of the older games, then it's like that character is queer in the sense that you can date them, but not in the sense that it's part of their lived experience, in the same way that if they were a character with an explicit heterosexual relationship, it would be, or even like a past heterosexual relationship. And we've gotten like some progress on that front. Like Dorothea feels like an explicitly LGBT character, but like it's slow progress.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like when you were talking about lived in experience and like Down to the Woods, like that's like people go like, oh, they can't be their whole character, can't like I'm like, but like being a lesbian is pretty definitional. Like it shouldn't be their whole character, right? But it should be a thing that matters to them, right? Like being bi, being trans, being gay, whatever, right?
Hmm. It has to be, it should be like a foundational part of them. Like it needs to be something that like partially defines them, because it's your identity that like being your, like whatever your queer identity may not be your only like foundational part of that, but it's something that's going to be important to you. It does change your lived experience.
Yeah. And straight people do it too, right? Like a character like
yes.
Sane is defined
Yeah.
by being heterosexual.
Yes. And that's like a whole character trait in like half these games. We've had a character who's done that in like like 4 or 5 of these games at this point. It's like,
Well, yeah, I mean, it's to the point where we have like the the womanizer trope, right?
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's one in every game.
We've had that trope
Yeah, and
for
we have
so
plenty of
long.
it
The
like
series
on
has
the
subverted it.
woman side, but like typically obsessed with exactly one man instead, because a woman being too into men would be deviant and slutty.
Yeah.
But her being obsessed with exactly one man, like Alm or Crom, that they can never be with, that's fine. They can be defined by being hetero in that way.
Yeah, no, we've had that so long. Oh my god, I'm happy we're moving away from that one too. Partially. I mean, Faye was bad though. Faye was a lot.
So that was a bit on like kind of what representation is to us, what's good, what's bad representation in our view. What are like some explicit examples of like you think when you think of like good representation in Fire Emblem? What are the kind of the pairings and characters you're thinking of?
I think Dorothy is one of the biggest ones. I think just like that's, especially with Hopes now. Hopes like made it even more explicit with stuff like some of her dialogue saying she'd be interested in marrying a woman. I think Shamir's also up there with Hopes. Hopes gave her a lot. I wasn't expecting it to, but it did. Um, Otherwise I'm not. Edelgard would be up there, I think. Oh, and
Yeah,
obviously Ike and
Edelgard has
Soren.
more paired endings with women than any male lord before, I think. I'm pretty sure I mathed it out before, maybe not.
I would be
I
shocked if
don't
she
know.
wasn't.
Yeah, other than avatars, which I mean,
Yeah.
get their pick of the litter,
Uh,
if they're men.
yes, if they're
Yeah.
men.
If they're men.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, outside of them, like she had like what, like she has like 7 paired endings with women.
It sounds right. And some of them
Yeah,
are
that
like
seems
more
about right.
explicit.
Um, I think if I wanted to go back a little further into like kind of when they weren't giving us explicitly LGBT characters as often, but they were kind of giving us queer coded characters or characters where they were like they were roommates vibes.
Yeah.
A
Yeah,
couple that jump out to me are actually I would say I was gonna say Leon in Echoes. I would say Leon is explicitly gay.
yeah, he's
Oh, that's
explicitly
true.
gay. I don't think there's any.
Oh,
I was
I
gonna put
There's
my
no
example to
forgot.
hetero
Heather too.
explanation
No,
for
I
that.
completely forgot about Leon for like a hot minute there. Yes. And he's good. I do like him a lot.
Um, I think he's a good example of what you guys were talking about earlier with a character where being gay is central to his character, right? Like it's
Hmm.
not the only thing about him, but it's important.
Yeah, like it's shaped like his life in a meaningful way. Which I think it's like a lot of like FE characters, especially with the app, like how the Avatar like romance works. Like their queerness, like, you could remove it if you didn't want to acknowledge it, which isn't really ideal. Whereas like
Yeah,
with
I
a character like
often talk
Leon, you
about
can't.
unavoidable
Mm,
queerness, right? As like a main factor that like when I'm looking for like what I want Fire Emblem to do is I want it like it's not even locked behind like the A support like that they say something, but like it becomes something that you know in multiple low rank supports. You know, it comes up, but it doesn't have to be the whole conversation. It's just it's something that you would know and that people would know about them.
Yeah. I think the way that I like to look at it is like if I played the game when I was like a dumb high schooler, could I have avoided it? Could I have ignored it? Um
Yeah. I think
and
that's a
I
good
think there
stress
are like
test.
some examples in old games where you could, and somewhere where you kind of can't. Like one where I would say like it's not technically explicit, but it's all but. Even when I was younger, I was like, okay, yeah, is like Ike Soren, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
where something I noticed when I was going back and reading the supports, that has made me almost say it was explicit, but it wasn't quite. Was that every paired ending in Radiant Dawn is romantic, all of them, except for like only the Ike Soren and Ike Renolf ones aren't explicitly romantic, but every other paired ending is, and I'm like, okay, so
and also
seems
like their
like there
ending
was a
is
trend here.
yeah, and their endings like
Yeah.
oh they went off like Ike and Soren went off together, and were never seen
Yeah.
again, and like Soren went with the only person he'd ever trusted, and it's like
They were roommates, Sec.
Yeah,
listen,
that's like to me like right there at explicit, and then same with Heather and Radiant Dawn. I feel like Radiant
oh
Dawn,
yeah,
Tellius really did. Um, it is kind of the bar. It's probably tied with Houses and Hopes
hmm.
for gay representation.
I think I remember like before Three Houses came out that Tellius was like talked about like it was the main like LGBT like region like series of games in the series, and I do think that holds up, and I think the way that it contrasts with Houses and Hopes is interesting because the characters in that, since there's no avatar romance, so their queerness has to come out in other ways than just a support. And so you get stuff like I feel like Ike and Soren is like one of the few LGBT relationships we've had in the series where it's like um it's an integral part of like their characters and not like something that's added just to let you do it yourself.
Yeah, like I was playing Path of Radiance again with one of my with one of my girlfriends, and she was playing Path of Radiance for the first time. She's a big fan of the series, but she never had a GameCube or a Wii. So she was playing from a GBA,
Understandable.
but she just missed the ones because she didn't own the consoles. And yeah, she was just like, "Yeah, this is definitely they're gay," and she could just like, and even with like Ike Renolf, it was like pretty clear to her without having to like say it. It was like, "Oh yeah, like I think there's something here."
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially with Ike and Soren, Ike is literally in Path of Radiance one of Soren's two support partners.
Yeah,
That's it. He only supports two people. It's Ike and
It's Stefan, and it's only
Stefan.
there.
Yeah.
It's only there so you can go. I know what you are. That's literally all he does in that support. It's just to go.
that's
I
a
know what
real
you
like
are.
yeah,
So
um
like
yeah,
Soren's very
it's
very much like I think Soren's in like kind of like a trope, like a gay coded trope in the Fire Emblem series that we've seen like from the beginning of the series, you
mhm.
know, to some extent with like starting with like Minerva Paula, where it's the like this important character and they're like very loyal retainer that's like very clearly into them.
yeah, I think with the Arcane games it's interesting
Yeah.
because there's so little dialogue where it's like with any relationship or character dynamic, it's like you kind of have to read into it, right?
Yeah, I would say that there wasn't a ton of juice for that specific ship until like way into the DS, right?
Yeah. It's
But I do think it was kind of like right, like the like the genesis is there, and then you get like a 7-7 or well the FE5. You get like Edia and God, what's her name? Athena? I forgot. I'm not a Thracia girly, but
Yeah,
where like her
Thracia is
whole
an
thing is about
interesting one.
being devoted to her and stuff.
Um, Thracia has my favorite crack ship, which is Dorius and August. But I do feel like kind of FE4 and onward is where you really started getting a lot of these ships, just because there's more dialogue in these games.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really surprise me that the first time we got like I feel like the biggest like the first like landmark like FE LGBT ship in the fandom is like Lynn and Florina. I mean, I'm sure there was people who shipped like other stuff before that, but I feel like that was the biggest one up to that point. And I
I
feel like
would
that's
agree.
not a coincidence with the fact that we have like paired endings now. And just a general like bigger support library. Like FE6 had supports, but the only endings were with Roy. And FE6 because of war quality was a little weird, and a lot of the characters were Arcanea like XPs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we've gone through some of the good ones. I feel like we also need to talk about some of the bad ones, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Specifically, I know when we were talking about our plans for the episode, we felt like we needed to address kind of the elephant in the room of Fire Emblem LGBT rep, which is Fates, and more specifically Soleil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo.
For the uninitiated, I will explain quickly Soleil, and why we're going to talk about her. Um, in the Japanese version of Fates, Soleil is. I haven't read all her supports. My understanding is she's pretty explicitly only into women in the Japanese. Like, because in the Korin support, which is the one I'm going to talk about, she like explicitly talks about only liking women. Um, but that support, the premise of that support is that Soleil gets weak at the knees and faints when she's near cute girls, and so asks Korin to help her get over that and not do that anymore. So Korin's solution to that is to drug her drink with a magic powder that makes her see men as women. Um, and then they get married 2 supports later. It's weird.
Yeah. It's real bad. And also see women as
Choice.
men. Important that she doesn't that it makes
Yeah.
her unattracted to women.
Yeah. It was a
Yeah.
choice.
They did change this in the US version to a support that, like, frankly doesn't make a whole lot of sense, which makes sense since they had to, like, change it, but I guess not change it too much, where instead of drugging her, Corin blindfolds her and just, like, speaks in a girly voice, and then they get married.
Fate's made a lot of
Gotta
decisions.
gotta love that you can't do it with female corn either, right? Like it's like I
Yeah.
mean a girly voice that's enough for her, but not a woman's voice.
Well, it's utterly bizarre to me that Soleil cannot as support any women.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, like the case for Soleil not being a lesbian and that it's not conversion therapy that I've seen placed on the internet is just that like in her S supports with men, she's like, sure, I'll date you.
Yeah, well,
Like
I
and if
guess
they're
in
not
the
being attracted
US
to them,
version specifically, they did add that line, like, in the Corin support. She's like, "Oh, I like men fine, just, not most of the time." But it feels weird.
yeah, no, I
Um,
think it's
yeah.
homophobic, right? I'm
Oh
saying that
no,
like
I
the
yeah.
case that people make, I feel like it's worth saying it, and so I can say like that's bullshit.
It's
Like, yeah, if you get to the S rank support of her saying I don't like men, and you say you're gonna like men, she'll say yeah, I like men a little bit.
there was an explanation I heard a while back about why she's like this. And I don't want to repeat it just because I don't know if it's true. It was like a Japanese cultural thing, but it was from like Reddit, so I don't know if I trust Reddit's opinion on Japanese culture. But the way it was described kind of exemplifies the problem where her being into women is treated like a frivolous little it's treated the same as Nina essentially being a Fujoshi in the same game, where it's like, oh, it's like funny that she's really into girls, but it's not like an actual thing about her. It's something she'll like get over. It's like, but it's like so integral to her, and it's like it's never treated like, oh, she just might be into women, like a normal thing that other people in this game seemingly are, like with Rajat. I wish it wasn't Rajat, but it is. It's
Yeah. This is there is a thing of that like is a trope that men like to impose onto sapphic women in Japan, and conservative women also use. Like conservative politicians often will say like, yes, people like girls in high school, but we grow out of it. It's like, I'm
yeah,
sorry,
that
ma'am,
was
I don't
partially
think that's
what I
normal.
heard.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we do that in the we do that in the West too, right? Like, how often do you hear like, "Oh, it's a phase," or like, um,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah,
I'll like
people
change
like
it.
women experiment in college, but then they
Yeah, yeah.
yeah
Or like you're
Yeah, the
just waiting
trope's
to meet
just
the right
to
guy.
move to high school instead of college, but it's because of all girls schools being a pretty big norm, but it is homophobic. It is a thing that explicitly homophobic people say. It is not like a belief held by queer people. And I know that because I was following Fates before it came out in English, right? And I was following the Japanese end, and there was this Japanese lesbian blog who talked about the Soleil supports when the game came out. So like that's how I knew about it.
Hmm.
Um, like right, so like there was a stink being made about it in Japan. It wasn't just like Americans heard about this terrible thing.
Oh,
Like
yeah, no, I feel like that's something like when we talk about the cultural differences that people act like Japan has like a monolith on like how they feel about queer people, but like it's similar-ish in the way it is like here where like there are actual queer people there and they have varying opinions on like how to on like queer issues.
yeah. As far as I can tell, not a fan. The queer women in Japan did not like the Soleil support who
I
play
can't
video
imagine they
games.
would be.
no
No, no, they
no
were not fans that I read. Obviously, maybe there's many I didn't see, but you know, my impression was. And then I think if we look at the next game that happened after, I think there's some credence
Yeah. It's
to the fact that there was blowback from everyone about
yeah.
the
I
way
And
that
think
Fates handled gay people.
even in like Echoes, there's actually like more than you would expect from like a game based on FE2.
yeah.
Where you have Leon, you also have oh, why can't I think of his name? The knight that you get at the beginning that's Ace.
Oh, Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas being Ace was like a pretty pleasant surprise to me when I played Echoes.
I always forget about that. But
Um
yeah, it's like they've like there's like a really nice support about it that's like surprisingly very accepting.
Yeah, it's good.
so definitely something they've done better on in recent entries.
I do think one thing that's like a factor. I think honestly, Fates was not it was a really bad place to start including any semblance of LGBT rep just because Fates. So even in Awakening, there's like some supports that are extremely weird because you can tell when they made this requirement that every support has to have like 4 supports and one of them has to end in romance that they just ran out of ideas. And I think that's even worse in Fates because they did it for the second time in a row. And so many of the kid characters are like completely removed from the actual context of the game. So you get characters like Nina, whose main funny trait is being a Fujoshi, or you get stuff like Saizo telling Charlotte that she should marry him because who better is she gonna find, or stuff like not threatening to eat Inigo in their S support. It's bizarre, and I think it kind of leads to some supports just being worse because the quality is worse.
Yeah, I do think also, even comparing to Awakening did not have everybody support everyone. Even though, like, I mean, there were still a lot of supports, and still the opposite gender ones had the, the S supports. So
Probably.
it had a little bit of that problem, but like, it wasn't like Fates where pretty much all the men support all the women.
Yeah, it's and I'll say that the issue in Awakening mostly comes up in child character supports, which I can imagine probably were written after because they're more of a bonus thing. They don't really necessarily benefit you in gameplay as much.
I will say, Awakening was too cowardly to actually give us gay Krabben.
That's true. Oh my god, Kraben is a whole different
Which they've
beast.
kind of They've corrected now. Now we get gay Robin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
now
like,
it's only gay Robin. There
yeah,
is
it's
no female
bizarre.
Robin. There is only male Robin X Crom.
I
What do you mean he marries a random village woman if you don't have supports with women?
He just marries Robin. I'm like not over. I'm never gonna get over the engaged Crom and Robin like ring that's called the Emblem of Bonds, and then Lucina talks to them like they're both her dad,
I
and
could not believe how explicit they made that in Engage. Like,
she calls Robin her father's other half and is embarrassed to be fighting him, and then
well,
afterward they're like, oh, we weren't gonna tell her about how worried we were. Like what?
or like Crom and Robin have a disagreement, and then one of them is like, "Not in front of the kid, okay?" Like,
No, literally, I'm like,
Exactly.
what?
It is wild how like whoever was in charge of writing the emblem rings clearly was the gay person in the room, the only person who was allowed to write gay things.
well,
Clearly,
they
Like
did
they
it
were
for
like,
Soren and Ike too, so you're probably
yeah,
right.
Sword and Ike was also
it,
really was actually really nice. I'm really happy they.
Soren's like, "Ike, no, you don't have to prove yourself to me." And I'm like, "Okay, Soren."
And then after he's like, "Please God, let me be let me be by your side again." One actually no. What fun fact? One of Soren's like voice lines in the Somniel, I think even before you get him, is literally just "Where's Ike?" It's it's extremely funny. Like they were not subtle in Engage, which is weird because Engage is otherwise really subtle for some reason.
Yeah, with everyone but like Marin.
Yeah,
You get the lesbian vibes from Marin, I feel like.
yeah. I think that's mostly carried by her design, you know. Like I think it's there, right? Like I mean,
mhm.
as a lesbian.
They're
But yeah, like they don't like right, like she has good support energy with the Racket of Psalm and with Alir if she's a girl.
I know a lot of people like her with Chloe too, which is the
Well,
only time anyone
And she's
talks
great
about a
with
Chloe
Chloe.
support.
Chloe, it's a great dynamic.
Yeah,
not to mention her personal skill is literally like, "I'm stronger if you surround me with women."
True, true.
it's true. There are
Yeah,
like
it's pretty gay.
there's some like gay S supports that are explicit. But it's not a ton. A lot of them are vague even with heterosexual relationships, which is it's very weird to me how like little romance is in Engage. I'm not really sure why that's the
Well,
case.
and it is weird because it seemed like there was more in the. Actually, I shouldn't say. Well, okay, I'm gonna say this now that I started saying this, but you should check the actual script and confirm that this is true and not just a thing that I read online. That there was more explicit romance in the Japanese script, but that some of that got trimmed out in the localization.
Yes, that is my
Yeah.
understanding as well. I was reading the data mines when the game was, getting leaked online and stuff, and reading the translations of the Japanese. And I would say that yeah, they definitely are more explicitly romantic, both for straight and gay stuff. And it seems
Yeah.
like Treehouse was just like, oh God, no! What did they do? What did they do? No! Why is it with that? With no? Okay, we're
I
just gonna get
just
rid of all romance. We can't. The ring has to be deniable. It is not romantic. Okay.
I wonder why they made that decision because I feel like romance and shipping has been a very successful part of Fire Emblem for the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it's like even if like the script thing is a factor, which it is. I mean, I know like some supports definitely got changed, but there's still like a lack of paired endings between anyone else, and that's like so weird to me. Like that's been a thing for how many games now, and it's just well
Yeah, since
liked. I'm not sure
FP7.
why they decided to get rid of that.
Oh, the removal of paired endings is crazy to me. I could not believe it when there weren't any.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
it's
shocked.
bizarre.
Because that's something I absolutely take for granted. And I'm going to assume it's going to be in the next game too. So it's just so weird to me that it wasn't in this one.
I mean, I hope it is because it's like even they even added them to like echoes and stuff. I mean, they weren't like you couldn't influence them. They were just kind of like a factor if both characters lived, but they still were there.
Yeah. No, it was shocking. Like, I remember being like, "Wait, what do you mean there's not? No, clearly it's a glitch, it's an error. We're
I
missing
mean,
some
it
data.
feels like
What
it
do you mean
without like
there's
some of the supports end. Like I'm like, all right.
Um,
yeah,
okay, so we've just spent a lot of time talking about kind of the LGB portion of the acronym. Um, but we haven't talked much about trans characters, or maybe more accurately, kind of the lack thereof in Fire
Yeah.
Emblem, because we don't get many.
I mean, it's kind of like it's essentially like the closest we really ever get is the very weirdly pervasive feminine like guy trope that has only gotten like further like I don't want to say further feminized, but like more intentionally like into like cross-dressing territory as the series has gone on. But like it's weird because the games seem to very rarely have like any meditation on what an identity that isn't cisgender would be. Um like I feel like with Forest and Rosato there's like a talk of acceptance of like how they want to present, but it never goes any deeper than that really. And I like Rosato, but I feel like there's like not um there's just nothing else there. There's no like consideration for any non cis identity.
Well,
yeah,
there's certainly no real exploration of the gender dynamic, right?
Yeah.
100%. I'm gonna get stones thrown at me. I don't like the Fire Emblem fanboys. I think it's bad. I think it's transphobic, even.
Yeah, I don't think that's unreasonable. Like it's just
Yeah.
it, if they existed in the sense of like, oh, they're just a character that exists alongside other like trans characters, I'd say that. But like the trope started with characters being like, "Oh, you look like a woman, but you're actually a man." And it's kind of like, why have we kept doing this for 10 plus years?
Someone at IS is fetish. I'm convinced at this point.
I would not be surprised, yeah.
Someone with power is like, put in a femboy. I need a femboy. Where's my
Fem-
femboy? Present him to me.
Femboy Fire Emblem character, save me. Save me, Fire Emblem Femboy.
But it's just one of those things where, like, outside of, I kind of Kaisa, do we have confirmation on Kaisa's gender?
Uh I I want
Kaisa
to
is a complicated little ball.
say
Um,
no.
Kai-
Kaisa's so weird.
Because my
yeah,
understanding, I did some reading up on Kaisa before this podcast. I now know more about Kaisa than I ever have before. Is
It's
that in the US version of Radiant Dawn, I believe they use he, him pronouns.
yes.
yes, that part's true.
Um, whereas in the Japanese version of the game, my understanding is that Kaisa uses feminine pronouns, but then my understanding is that this isn't in Japanese, that isn't necessarily as indicative of like gender as it would be in the US. Is that correct, Sek?
Yeah, it can mean that. It's kind of like J- Japanese isn't really gendered the same way that like Latin languages are.
Hmm.
Like there's like pronouns in the sense of like there's terms that mean like oh I or me, but there's no like he or she. Like some of the different versions of I or me or other pronouns are like just specifically male or feminine sounding, but it's weird because there are male characters that can use like the more feminine sounding ones, and it's also like it's complicated basically.
Yeah, like, yeah. Fire Emblem Heroes uses they them pronouns in the English side of things for Kaisa. So, like,
Yeah,
they now acknowledge that there's something gender happening with Kaisa, but like, is Kaisa a straight trans woman, a queer non-binary person, a gay man? It
it's
depends on
it's
the translation you've read, I guess.
it's such a weirdly complicated situation for a character that is by all accounts a bit character in Radiant Dawn.
Well, and then according to the wiki, in the 20th Fire Emblem anniversary, or the Fire Emblem 20th anniversary encyclopedia, the Kaisa subtitle is like, the body is male, the heart is female, with a question mark at the
Yes.
end. That's why I say it like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, my reading of Kaisa is that Kaisa is a trans woman, but
I also
So
I
lean
have no
towards
is
idea.
that
this the
reading.
closest we've ever gotten to a trans character in Fire Emblem? Like
Yeah.
Yeah,
confirmed.
Well, okay, there
yeah,
is. I I guess you could say Limstella at this point kind of is because they use they them and they've actually kept that.
That's
Um,
yeah,
true. I suppose
I
Limstella is I would say Limstella's like just
yeah.
non-binary,
Limstella
right?
is weird in that Limstella was assigned non-binary at birth, right?
yeah, non
Yeah,
non
I guess that would be the argument is that like
yeah.
is Limstella non-binary or do morphs not have gender?
I it's weird because like I we never really get an idea if it's the same for Effidel. I mean, I don't know if anybody cares about Effidel, but like or like any of the other morphs because the other morphs are like based on real people. Like, does Kashuna have gender? I have no idea. It's vague. I'm still kind of happy they kept it for heroes, but it's not exactly like the pinnacle of trans representation.
Yeah, yeah. Like, and then outside of that, like, I think that Forrest's narrative reads as a trans woman's narrative. Like, when I read the story, like, okay, your dad doesn't accept you. He's a total dick about it. But then, like, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just like
No, like it
I
kind
can
of
be a boy
begins.
and be a disappointment to my dad too.
And be into clothing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically, it's kind of like, oh, I can be into women's clothing. It's very empowering. It's very
yeah,
empowering.
yeah. And then with Rosato's the only one allowed to wear women's clothes that like cross gender clothes at all.
Yeah,
Even though Jade and some other characters wear more masculine clothes as their like default camp clothes.
yeah.
Like the women can't wear male clothes casually. Only if only their default, but they can't wear men's clothes otherwise. But
Hmm.
Rosato is allowed to wear women's clothes.
I
Yeah.
do feel like Rosato has a bit deeper of an actual like examination on identity than like Forrest did. But it's still never really like touches on like what like if they have any like identity that isn't just a cis guy that is really into like more feminine clothing.
I mean, I think the thing that gets me about these characters is like I mentioned earlier that like whether like I don't know, I think you could do a character that's like I don't know, a cis guy or a cis woman exploring like their relationship with the traditional expectations of their gender.
Yeah,
Um but it doesn't really feel like Fire Emblem does more than like kind of gesture at that vaguely, right?
Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
And I think that it's specifically femboys, right, and not right, which is like
Yeah,
a known fetish. Like nobody working there doesn't know that that is like a thing that there's a lot of cis men that are into, right?
Mhm.
Like and not butch
yeah.
women, right? It's never like let's explore the expectations of women and let's have like a
It's like if
woman with like a buzz cut and like a
yeah,
right
Yeah, I mean,
sailor
probably the
suits.
closest we've gotten to that is what Silly Fire Emblem Awakening, maybe.
yeah. Like we've had like more masculine like mask women, but it's not even usually like at like something they even really like touch upon. And maybe it is a little sometimes. Like Sully might have a bit, um, but like it's never a lot,
Yeah,
and it's never presented as strongly as the femboy stuff is.
yeah. And I think one problem with the femme boy stuff and the like kind of like masculine coded women, the couple that do exist, is that they're detached from queerness, right? Like
Yeah.
we have real life men who like to wear women's clothing that are cis. They're called drag queens,
Hmm.
and they're typically queer. They're usually bi or gay or trans women. Most drag queens historically have been bi or gay men or drag queens. Either way, connected to the queer community, right? There's
Hmm.
very few cis straight like feminine guys, and same with butch women, right? Like usually they would be queer.
I think that kind of also kind of like it's like these characters, if they existed in a vacuum, I wouldn't have as much of a problem with. It's the fact that they exist in a game that does not want to acknowledge any other gender like non-conforming expression or a deeper like meditation on it that makes it feel shitty.
Yeah.
Well, also the fact they keep making jokes about, oh, they look like a woman, but they're a man. That doesn't help.
Yeah. The fact that it's part of a bit.
They did do less of that in Engage, if I wanted to give them a little credit.
No, that's
Yeah.
true. Rosado is a bit better in that regard, but yeah.
I do wonder if that's, localization or not, which I have no clue because I didn't really touch Rosado stuff too much. Rosado was like the final straw for me, where I was like, I'm done with it. I'm not even going to give him credit because I used to be the person on the internet who was like, Forrest is a trans woman. It's so clear. And then I was like, no, you know what? Forrest is a femboy. Fire Emblem's not ever going to do anything good about trans characters again. I give up.
It really does feel that way, and it's kind of sad, huh?
It
Yeah,
is.
it is. It
Um,
is. Like when Yuri was announced, I thought, oh, wow, we're going to get a non binary character because Yuri is like so, like, right, clear in his presentation, right?
Yeah.
mhm.
Like he wears makeup and heels
Mm-hmm. It's, I mean,
100% of the time.
at least he's explicitly bi. I'll give him
Yeah,
that, but yeah. It's
yeah,
just that the series
yeah,
does
which I,
not want to,
yeah,
the series just does not want to, like, delve into trans stuff, which is, like,
yeah.
any, like, gender meditation, which is, like,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is like transness is more political than queerness.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure that's a factor.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I can't imagine it
Like,
isn't. I especially can't imagine that with like all of these characters, like even Rosado, Forrest, Yuri, like any of them that like at some point in the writers' room, it was never considered they just be explicitly transgender. I mean, before Engage came out, there was that whole debate on if Rosado was going to be a trans man or not, and obviously he isn't. But like, I feel like that kind of plays
yeah.
into it.
No. I was gonna say that I was definitely there in the trenches. I really thought I was trying to good faith intelligence systems as much as I could and be like, no, look for Rosado can wear women's clothes. No one else can cross gender clothes and all this other stuff. Here's all the reasons why I think we're finally gonna get a trans character. Did not happen.
Yeah, yeah,
It just frustrates me because I feel like it doesn't even I feel like Rosado is hypothetically the kind of character I should like, where like I'm someone who like can struggle a bit with masculinity, right?
Mhm.
Like, um, I like the idea of getting a piercing or wearing like more gender non-conforming clothing, um, and that's hard for me, because uh, self-consciousness and like kind of internalized like expectations of masculinity, right?
Yeah.
um so hypothetically, a character like Rosado, I'm like, okay, maybe this like gets into some of that, but it really doesn't. Like there's just no exploration of any of the dynamics.
Yeah, like there's
yeah.
no like worries about
I don't need like all of the characters to be weirded out by it, but like I don't know, it feels like there should be at least some discussion of it beyond just like, oh, I like cute things, so I wear cute things.
yeah. And I think
Yeah.
that's a general feeling I have about queerness in Fire Emblem. Like even in like Three Houses, which I would say is probably right, it's up there. Like we don't really get a weight of like what it is to be queer in this like eugenics fueled society. We can assume it's bad,
It's like
but
it's like weird because it doesn't even seem like it doesn't seem like it's like even like it can't even tell if it's supposed to be signatized. I feel like it's not because like Ray is bisexual,
So
I guess.
something that is not explicitly said by the game but leads me to believe that that folks would not be jazzed about queerness in Fodlan, is that society is so crest based and like nobility based, so there's
Hmm.
a lot of value placed on like having a kid,
That's true. That's a good
mhm,
point. Yeah.
particularly if you have a crest, right? Or if you don't have a
Hmm.
crest, there would be a lot of focus on trying to kind of marry into one.
Yeah.
yeah. I think the society in Fodlan is definitely homophobic. I think there's evidence to it, but they don't really dive into it, right?
Hmm.
Like Rhea is bisexual in that she will be into you no matter what gender you are, the vessel of her mother.
Rhea and Violet is a wild ride of a pairing.
She is your grandma, and also you're her mom.
It's incredible.
It's
It's
Fire
honestly
Emblem's greatest piece of incest yet.
that's what I'm saying. Like it's honestly like impressive.
Okay,
Like it's a new
how does
level.
it stack up with like Revelation surprise incest though?
Okay, that
Which do we prefer? Do we
okay.
prefer like grandma and also my daughter incest or jump scare incest?
I think jump scare incest is worse. Um, Partially because so many people like actively did Corin and Azura and then just get jump scared by that.
Yeah, like they push Korra and Azura so hard.
The Biothrea one is just so absurd that I kind of like just think it's funnier than anything else. Like, what even happened? What's going on here?
You know, but yeah. So I think like there's a lot of evidence that Fodlan is homophobic. Like right, like you said, the quest system, right, the eugenics based
Yeah.
system that they live under, right. There's a lot of pressure to have kids. There's a lot of pressure to have, babies. I don't think Rhea is the homosexual's greatest defender, even if we take her as being bi, which I think is questionable given that her only evidence of that is that she's into her mom.
Yeah, I mean,
What is evidence?
I, I wouldn't foresee Freya dealing with queer issues if it was something she had to take a hard stand on, because that's kind of like antithetical to her own like character issues. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, it's one of
I
those
guess with Yuri especially, it feels like it
it's one of those
would be
things
like there's
where I feel like this is true of many of the issues in Fodlan. It would be systemic, right?
yes,
Yeah.
Like
that's true.
why does Dorothea want to in some of her like why does Dorothea flirt with men maybe like to marry one and like get some money, right? Because that's like
Hmm.
socially advantageous.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we see a lot of that. We see a lot of like in like basically every woman supports. We find out that their dad is trying to marry them to a man specifically,
Hmm.
right? Like even though
Yeah,
some of
that's
these
true.
women have queer
That's
endings, like
true.
Mercedes, right?
Hmm.
Or Edelgard talks about how she might have to take a husband.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also like I
For
guess this is never explicitly stated, but it feels pretty heavily implied to me that like any of the guys with crests, the expectation is that they're going to have a kid, right?
Yeah.
yes, yeah, no, it's 100%. It's the way that like that kind of homophobia manifests, right? Where like women get the like very explicitly sold as property, where men are just expected to have their choice of the litter, but it has to be a
Hmm.
woman.
Hmm.
Like it's going to be a little bit less bad for them, but it's still not good. But they'll have the power in the homophobic imbalance, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
All right.
You know?
We've been talking for a little while on representation here, so I want to close us out on one last question, which is what do we want to see Fire Emblem do in the future? And I don't mean like what do we expect they're going to do, but like what do we want them to do, you know?
Yeah,
Bare minimum, I want paired endings back. I It's fairly frustrating because I feel like in terms of endings, like the amount we got in Three Houses is like close to what I'd want. Like where there's a lot of like same sex endings and a lot of like opposite gender endings and stuff. Um, it wasn't as explicit as I'd want, but I would like that back.
Yeah, I would agree. Definitely bare
yeah,
minimum paired endings coming back and hopefully more explicitly gay paired characters. I think for me, in addition to that, something that I would like is I feel like even among the explicitly gay characters, it's like surprisingly rare for just like a man and a man or like a woman and a woman to be like, I love you, or like, let's explicitly get married. So I would like to do away with the like, and then they went to live together forever. Or like in Catherine and Shamir's, obviously, like there's implications, right? Where they're like, oh, we could get married in the S support, and then the paired ending is like, oh, and then they went and lived together forever, and you're the implications are there. I would like it to be explicitly stated at least some of the time.
Yeah, like the closest we get is like the Dorothea Petra one.
Mm-hmm. No, the Dorothea Petra one too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want any more of the history. We'll say they were roommates, best friends. Like, I think there's an argument to do it in some of the routes of Three Houses to write history. We'll say they're best friends because the systems of power stay in control. But like, and there's no reason in like the Edelgard route, right, that anyone would be like, and they were besties for life.
Yeah.
Like, they got rid of the nobility, like, right, like in Constance's solo ending, right? It mentions that like her family does not get things by themselves, and they actually have to earn like their position.
Right. So then logically, people should be able to marry whoever they want.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it doesn't matter. Like her genes don't matter. Like who she, like if she adopted a kid, they would have as much of a shot as a peasant at getting like being a magical minister. And yeah, so like it is. I definitely would like more explicitness, and I'd like paired endings, but I feel like that's the bare minimum. I don't think
It
I would
is.
buy the
No,
next
yeah,
Fire
that
Emblem game
wasn't.
if there wasn't paired endings in it,
Yeah.
and some of them weren't gay.
I agree. We're talking
Like,
pretty bare minimum here. We're not asking for much.
yeah, but yeah, what I
Well, I
want,
mean, that
right?
was like the first thing.
I'll accept your challenge. What do I want to see? And I'm not going to give IS any slack. Let's go. So I want a lesbian. I want a trans woman. I want both of those. I want it to be explicit in the text and unavoidable. I don't want it to be up for debate. I don't want there to be an internet argument. I want it to just, it's a thing that happens in the plot. You know about it. And I'd love there to be a bi man and a bi woman and a gay man. I love one of each at least, preferably multiple. You know?
I above like the thing I want most is like I also want all those, but I want them to just be like I want it to be like a part of their like lived experience, like what we were saying earlier,
Yes.
just something that like has noticeably affected them in their life and is core to like their identity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I don't think what we want is like the cartoon gay ending thing that like has happened as like a phenomenon in like America, where like a pair of women will pair off at the last episode and maybe they'll kiss or hold hands or something, and then it'll be
Yeah,
canon.
yeah,
Like I want it to be a part of their lives and their experiences and their like how they see the world. And I think that we kind of got close with like Monica and Hopes, but I think that it's very
yeah,
telling that that game got rid of paired endings
yeah, and
altogether and romantic supports altogether to get us like, is that what it takes for us to get an explicitly lesbian character again? Like Monica, like just
yeah, and it's
completely
like
denying agency. Like,
um I feel like a lot of Hopes has like a lot more explicit references to it, like the Shamir paralogue where she's like, yeah, this is someone I like dated in the past, and it's a woman, and like Dorothy is saying she'd be interested in marrying a prince or a princess. But I
yeah, I
think
think
it's
Domain
hard.
also had a like he likes
Oh
men
yeah, that's true.
line.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just I think it's hard in the Avatar games that we have now, and I don't see them not including an Avatar with how popular they've been, and we've had them for so long,
Yeah,
where it's kind of like every character has to be at least on some part bisexual, which is just it's frustrating because there's like it doesn't even feel like real representation to bisexual people because it's not a factor until then.
Well, no, I mean that's what I
hmm
was saying before when I was saying that like in those games it kind of feels like Schrodinger's bisexual to me because like none of the characters, okay, some of the characters in Engage feel a little queer to me, but it's independent of the fact that I can marry them. Most of the characters, even though I can gay marry them, do not feel queer to me. You know what I mean? Like if
Yeah.
it's
yeah,
only noticeable if I marry them, then it just doesn't feel quite as notable, I guess.
yeah.
hmm
Like, yeah, I would love if the characters had individual sexualities. I think that'd be great. And I think the individual sexualities could be everyone is bisexual, but then we should get like a diverse representation of bisexuality. We should have people who have dated same gender partners, people who have only dated partners of the opposite gender.
Yeah.
People who are discovering their sexuality, people who have never dated at all, and like have like, if everyone's going to be bi, let's represent bi people very, very broadly. Let's like, bi people are very diverse.
Yeah. And I would say we saw a game that did that. And not that this game did it perfectly, but did it like better than Engaged, I would say, in Baldur's Gate 3. Where like, I don't know, the characters talk about their exes, they'll have sex with each other if you don't. It doesn't feel necessarily like characters just like become bisexual because you want to fuck them, you know?
Yeah, that's an issue where it's like it needs to be independent of you, the player. And sometimes it is in Three Houses. It's just, but that's like the characters that are like the most queer and not like the average person, which feels like a shame.
Like Mercedes, who I love Mercedes, like definitely felt more like she was a bi option because Fates got critiqued for having sadistic, evil bisexuals, and that was like a homophobic stereotype. And they were like, "Don't worry, Catholics are gay now. we're not homophobic.
We didn't even
think Catholics
listen. They were like, the Pope's gay now. It's fine.
She's gay and into incest. Oh, damn it!"
Listen, at this point, the Fire Emblem game where we have no debatable incest will be like the rapture will happen afterward. The world won't be able to handle it.
You gotta put in the list of Fire Emblem dev fetishes.
All right.
It's been for so long.
Well, on that note of our inability to escape Fire Emblem incest until the heat death of the universe, I'm going to close this out. Thank you, Alexis, Sara, for coming on with us. At the end of the podcast today, I'd like to plug Palestine Children's Relief Fund. I'm going to be donating the profits from the podcast and the YouTube channel there this month. They provide humanitarian relief to Palestinian children and displaced Gazan families. If you want to make a donation, you will find a link in the video description or podcast description, the description of wherever you're listening to this. But yeah, is there anything you guys want to plug before we hop off?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the charity, please go, please look at it. It is really important that we do what we can to help the kids and everyone in Gaza as much as we can. So like any kind of relief and charity. So, look at that. But, if you want to see me, if you want to see more of me and stuff, I'm cooking up an SRPG in my free time. I don't know when it'll come out. It's not my number one priority. Because I'm probably just going to take money I get from other projects and slowly invest it into that so I can make it a real thing. But if you want to check out TTRPGs, that's what I'm mostly working on right now, like Thirsty Sword Lesbians. I'm working on the next expansion. You could check me out on @transcomics on Twitter, or @Alexis Sara, basically everywhere on the internet, Mastodon, Tumblr, Cohost, Blue Sky, all of the places. I'm probably Alexis Sara there. But how much I post there, that's debatable.
You should definitely check out Thirsty Sword Lesbians. It's pretty sweet.
It's great. And it's not just for lesbians. It's fantastic for anyone of any sexuality, especially queer people. It's made with, all kinds of queer people in mind, just centering lesbians and then expanding outwards.
Yeah. Well, thank you both again for coming on. And we'll see you viewers next month. Hope you have a lovely month. And as always, a big thank you to my geckos on Patreon, and a shout out to my skinks, Red Mage Morgan, Chicken, Morgwolf, Upscale Furry Trash, Cosplay Sylveon, Emma, Van West, Ikepoo, Lucy Sev, Romeo, Wingman, Lonely Voxel, Aaron Gedden, Mikabre, Stars to Art Doopy, and the Noodle Doodler. I really appreciate all of your support, and if you want to support the channel and get shout outs in videos like this, you'll find a link in the video description. Either way, thank you for hanging out, and have yourself a lovely week.